Hello, brothers and sisters. This is Sister Mary. We are reading Esther, chapter 6 through 10. I'm reading out of the Interlinear Bible. It is the Hebrew and the Aramaic translation of the Old Testament. Thank you for joining me for today. Chapter 6 of Esther. On that night, the kings slept. It looks like fed. It's got to be sheep. On that night, the kings fled. And he said to bring in the book of the records of the Chronicles. And they were being read before the king, and it was found written that Mordecai had told Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, the guards of the threshold, who sought to stretch forth a hand against King Ahasuerus. And the king said, "What honor and dignity has been done to Mordecai for this?" And the young servants of the king, of his ministers, said, "Nothing has been done for him." And the king said, "Who is in the court?" And Haman had come into the outer court of the king's house to speak to the king, to hang Mordecai on the wooden gallows which he had built for him. And the king's servant said, "Haman stands in the court." And Haman came in, and the king said to him, "What shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor?" And Haman thought in his heart, "To whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself?" And Haman answered the king, "For the man whom the king delights to honor, let the royal clothing be brought, which the king puts on himself, and the horse that the king rides on, and the royal crown which is set on his head. And let this clothing and horse be given into the hand of one of the most noble men, of the most noble princes, and let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor, and cause him to ride on the horse through the street of the city, and call out before him. In this way shall be done to the man whom the king delights in honoring him." And the king said to Haman, "Hurry, take the clothing and the horse as you have said, and do so to Mordecai the Jew, king's gate. Do not fail to do any of all things you have spoken." And Haman took the clothing and the horse, and dressed Mordecai, and caused him to ride through the street of the city, and called out before him, "In this way shall be done to the man whom the king delights in honoring him." And Mordecai came again to the king's gate. But Haman hurried to his house mourning, and his head covered. And Haman told his wife Teresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him. Then his wise men and his wife Teresh said to him, "If Mordecai is the seed of the Jews, before whom you have begun to fall, you shall not prevail against him, but shall surely fall before him." And while they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived, and they hurried to bring Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. Chapter 7 of Esther. And the king and Haman came to the banquet of Queen Esther. And the king said again to Esther on the second day of the banquet of wine, "What is your petition, O Queen Esther? And it shall be given to you. And what is your request? It shall be done to the half of the kingdom." And Esther the queen answered and said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, many people and I, for destruction, for murder, and punishing. But if we have been sold for male slaves and slave girls," silent, though the adversary could not make up for the king's loss. And King Ahasuerus answered and said to Esther the queen, "And where is this one who is filled with pride in his heart to do so?" And Esther said, "A man, an enemy, and a hating one, Haman, this evil one." And Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. And the king, rising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. And Haman remained to beg for his life from Esther the queen, for he saw that evil was determined against him by the queen. For he saw that evil was determined against him by the king. And the king returned out of the garden to the palace, or to the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman had fallen where Esther lay. And the king said, violate the queen with me in the house. The word went from the king's mouth, and they covered Haman's face. And Harbonah, one of the eunuchs, said before the king, also look, the wooden gallows which Haman made for Mordecai, the one who had spoken good toward the king, is standing at Haman's house. And the king said, hang him on it. And they hanged Haman on the wooden gallows which he had prepared for Mordecai, and the king's wrath lay down. Chapter 8 of Esther. On that day King Ahasuerus gave the house of Haman, the vexer of the Jews, to Esther the queen. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was to her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. And Esther spoke yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet. And she begged him with tears to put away the evil of Haman the Agagite, and his plot which he had plotted against the Jews. Then the king held out the golden scepter to Esther, and Esther rose up and stood before the king and said, if it pleases the king, and if I have found favor before him, and the thing is right before the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to bring back the documents, a sly plan by Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews who are in all the king's provinces. For how shall I be able to look on the evil that shall find my people? Or how shall I be able to look on the slaughter of my kindred? And King Ahasuerus said to Esther the queen, and to Mordecai the Jew, behold, I have given Haman's house to Esther, and they have hanged him on the wooden gallows, because he put forth his hand against the Jews. And you write to the Jews according to the good in your eyes, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writing which is written in the king's name, and sealed with the king's ring, there is no taking back. And the king's scribes were called at that time in the 3rd month, that is, the month Sivan, on the 23rd of it. And it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews, and to the satraps, and the governors, and the princes of the provinces, which were from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, to every province according to its writing, and to every people in their language, and to the Jews according to their writing and according to their language. And he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, and sealed with the king's ring. And he sent letters by riders on horseback, riders on royal steeds, stallions, even sons of Mars, or mares. In them the king gave to the Jews in every single city the right to gather together, and to stand for their life, to destroy, to kill, to cause to perish, all the power of the people and province, the ones compressing them, both little ones and women, and to take that which they own for a prize. On one day, in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, the copy of the writing to be made law in every province was revealed to all peoples, even to the Jews, being ready for this day, to avenge themselves on their enemies. The runners, riders on stallions, royal steeds, went out, being hurried and pressed on by the king's command. And the order was given at Shushan, the palace. And Mordecai went out from before the king in apparel of the kingdom, of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. For the Jews it was light and gladness, and joy and honor. And in every province and in every single city, the place where the word of the king and his law touched, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell on them. Chapter 9. And in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's command and his order came to be done in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to take power over them, though it was turned around so that the Jews ruled, they over the ones hating them. The Jews gathered together in their cities in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to stretch out a hand against those seeking their evil. And no man stood in their presence, for their fear fell on all the peoples. And all the rulers of the provinces, and the satraps, and the governors, and those doing the business which was to the king, were lifting up the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell on them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house. And his fame went out into all the provinces, for this man Mordecai was going on and growing greater. And the Jews struck against all their haters with a stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they deserved to those who hated them. And in Shushan the palace the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. And Parshandatha, and Dalphon, and Aspatha, and Poratha, and Adaliah, and Aridatha, and Parmashta, and Arisia, and Aridia, and Vajestha, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the vexer of the Jews, they killed. But they did not lay their hands on the spoil. On that day, the number of those who were killed in Shushan the palace was brought before the king. And the king said to Esther the queen, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace, and 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the provinces of the king? And what is your petition? And it is given to you. And what further request? And it will be done. And if it pleases the king, let it be given to the Jews in Shushan to do tomorrow according to this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the wooden gallows. And the king commanded it to be done so. And the order was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. And the Jews in Shushan also assembled on the 14th day of the month Adar, and killed 300 men at Shushan. But they did not lay their hands on the spoil. But the rest of the Jews in the king's provinces gathered and stood up for their lives, and a rest from their enemies, and to kill 75,000 of their foes. But they did not lay their hands on the spoil. On the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day of the same, they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. And the Jews at Shushan assembled on the 13th day of it, and on the 14th day of it, and to rest on the 15th of the same, and to make it a day of feasting and gladness. On account of this, the Jews of the villages who lived in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, a day of sending portions to one another. And Mordecai wrote these things, and sent letters to all the Jews in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, near and far, to cause to rise among them to act on the 14th day of the month Adar, and the 15th day of the same, yearly, as the days in which the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned to them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day, to make them days of feasting, joy, and of sending portions to one another and gifts to the poor. And the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written to them, because Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast Pur, that is, the lot, to torment them and to destroy them. But when Esther came to the king, he commanded by the letter, let his wicked plot, which he plotted against the Jews, return on his own head. And they hanged him and his sons on the wooden gallows. On account of this, they call these days Purim, after the name of Pur. For on account of this, all the words of this letter, and what they saw concerning this matter, and what had touched them, the Jews rose up and took on themselves, and on their seed, and on all joining themselves to them, even not to pass, to be keeping these 2 days according to their writing, and according to their time every year. and that these days should be remembered and acted upon in every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not pass from among the Jews, and their memory not perish from their seed. And Esther the queen, the daughter of Abigail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote with all authority to cause to be lifted the second letter of Purim. And he sent the letters to all the Jews to the 127 provinces of the kingdoms of Ahasuerus, words of peace and truth. This was in order to confirm these days of Purim in their set times, according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had ordered them, and as they had decreed for themselves and for their seed. The matters of the fastings and of their cry, and the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. Chapter 10 of Esther. And King Ahasuerus laid a tax on the land and on the isles of the sea, and on all the acts of his authority and his might, and the declaration of the greatness of Mordecai, with which the king made him great. Are they not written in the book of the matters of the days of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai, the kings of Media, or for Mord, the kings of Media and Persia, for Mordecai, the Jew, was next to King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and pressing to the multitude of his brothers, seeking the welfare of his people, and speaking peace to all his seed. That concludes the reading of Esther, and thank you for joining me for today's reading. We will be beginning in the book of Job next, and we are almost in completion of reading the Old Testament.